lot of times we think about leadership as a position, and that's what we're trained to think about. Like, hey, you want to go through your career and you want to progress, you got to get a title, and then you got to get a bigger title, and you got to get another, and that gives rise to the myth that leadership is about the title, or that it's about the positional authority that we have, and those kind of things. And it's really not. And that's kind of what I noticed is people are chasing titles, people are chasing power, and that's a great thing. I mean, if in some cases it can be a great thing, but it's not necessarily leadership. Leadership is about how we go together from point A to point B, however long that journey is, however difficult it is or easy, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's about how do we go from here to there. And I thought about it, and I asked the question, what's different between the people that I have worked with that have been leaders that I love, that people follow, and what's different between them and the ones that are worried about people whispering about them behind closed doors?
Hello, listeners and viewers. This is Leading with Integrity, and today we are welcoming back a favourite guest from the past, Mr. David Bates, and he's here to talk about his new book that is out this week. I think it came out on Monday. So, yeah, the 3rd of November. We'll be talking about some of the core concepts in his book, in the work that he does, and in my own approach to leadership and leading with integrity. So we'll be covering things like effective communication, what goes wrong, what it looks like when it's right, what we can all do to be better at it. We'll be talking about his concept of leadership posture, what it is, how to get it right, as well as empathy and taking care of yourself, and why these concepts matter so much for modern leadership, what some of the daily practices look like, and much more besides. As always, there's some great tangents here. If you're looking to learn more about leadership, how to practice it, then you couldn't go far wrong with this episode or with Dave's book. The book is called Engineering Wisdom, a practical guide to building leadership that lasts. And I will let Dave, the man himself, tell you all about it very shortly.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
Dave, welcome back to Leading with Integrity. It's been over a year. I had to check. It doesn't feel like over a year since our last episode together, but yeah, welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
So for the benefit of anyone in the audience who's new and maybe hasn't heard our previous episodes, would you like to reintroduce yourself? Tell everyone a bit about your career story and what you do and why you do it and why we're here today as well.
Yeah, sure. Always great to be here, and I love listening to the other guests on the show. So many good, insightful things come out of the interviews that you have with folks. So thanks for doing this work, and thanks to everybody else who listens to making it possible. I've had a long and winding journey, and I think we got into that in a lot of detail the first time we talked. So I'll kind of leave that tension there for some other folks to go into the back catalog. But I've had more than 30 years of experience in leadership roles, from everything from IBM and some of the other large companies in the world, all the way to starting up my own things and everything in between. Funded startups and joint ventures and just all kinds of interesting things. I've had the opportunity to pitch venture capitalists and to help other people refine their pitches. And all of those operating experiences led me to the place where I am now as an executive coach and an interim executive in small and medium businesses that I do on either a fractional or interim basis. And I was trained as a coach back in the 1990s before coaching was what it is now. And I've gotten to see the industry move. And at that time, I had explored the possibility of going and becoming a full-time coach. And I chose to go the operating route and spent the next 20 plus years doing operational work. And then after a stint as a COO in a small but growing software services company, I decided to finally lean into being a coach, and so that's primarily what I do now. Is I mostly work as an executive coach, helping leaders, executives, and founders get from where they are to where they want to be. Not necessarily always that they're stuck. But sometimes they're just kind of grappling with an opportunity and they're out there on their own. They may have a leadership team, but there's some of those things that you just feel like you can't say to the leadership team. And you need somebody to kind of help you unpack what you've been carrying around and see the patterns that you're too close to. It's like one of those magic eye things. You got to kind of let your eye go in and let your eye go out. And then finally you see it, and you can't see it for all the noise until somebody says, it's okay, just relax. And, so that's the work that I get to do now. And that's all led me to write this book called Engineering Wisdom. And the subtitle is it's a practical guide to building leadership that lasts. And it's been a journey of observing people who lead well and people who don't, and suffering some of the pain as a person under one of those or more of those leaders who haven't led well, and probably from time to time being one of those leaders that hasn't necessarily led as well as I would have liked. So that's the whirlwind, I guess. I'll stop there.
Yeah. So I mean, you were coaching before it was cool, I guess.
Yes. And in fact, it really wasn't even cool back then, especially not in technical spaces. And that was a big part of the reason that I didn't go into coaching, was because I kind of didn't want to deal with the social stigma of in the technical spaces. It was kind of seen as why would anybody do that? We don't need that. We pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps and we figure stuff out because we're engineers. We figure stuff out. So it really wasn't that popular back then either.
Yeah, I'm sort of fascinated by that as almost like a social phenomenon, even over the last sort of 5 to 10 years, and like the growth of coaching. And
yeah,
I don't know, like anecdotally, I feel like COVID had a massive impact on that, just because everyone was sort of forced to reassess, weren't they, during those few years? And so coaching was quite easy to deliver virtually as well. So I think that kind of, I think that's why it exploded. I don't know. I don't have any data for that, but
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of, I think actually the explosion of coaching happened a little bit prior to COVID, and it's very accessible. So one of the big challenges in coaching right now is people have different definitions of what coaching is and what it means. And I think we covered some of that in the last chat that we had, but coaches we're not here to tell you what to do. That's not our job, but everybody seems to think it is. And there's some really great resources out there about how to control that tendency as a coach. But our job as a coach is to come alongside and help other people be successful. I wrote a post recently about an experience I had stepping off the back of somebody's ski boat. I went way down under the water, just stepping off and gravity pulling under. And the life jacket, everybody's supposed to wear a life jacket when they're on the lake. Just a PSA there. Right. But the life jacket pulls you back up to the surface where the air is. And coaches are kind of like life jackets. Good consultant is like a life jacket. Our job is to give you the buoyancy and the space to get to where the air is so that you can breathe clearly, so you can do what you got into the water to do. And a lot of coaches aren't that way. A lot of folks are like, well, let me tell you what I think you should do. And that's kind of created a bad taste for a lot of people. And then other people want coaches to tell them what to do. And then they're upset when it doesn't work. And why would it work? The coach doesn't have all the context. So it's this really important thought partnership that we engage in with our clients to help them where they are, not where we think they should be.
Yeah, I must say I do like the life jacket analogy. That is a nice one. It's much better than safety net. So I feel like by the time you need a safety net, it's kind of too late. And also that's downwards, whereas a life jacket is upwards, and that feels better somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, it's nice. It's nice. Let's talk a bit more about the book, because that's kind of why we're here, isn't it? I mean, I've read it, which is, I don't want to say that's a rare thing when I have an author on that I've read the book. I very often read the books after I've interviewed them. Most interviews, it'll be the first time I'm meeting them. So
Yeah.
I kind of feel a bit giddy about this. It's like, yeah, we can talk about a thing I've already read. Yeah.
Well, and to be fair, the book is better because of you having read it. There's a handful of people who really helped me sharpen the saw, as it were, to say like, hey, this is how I'm seeing it. What makes sense, what doesn't make sense, and that kind of thing. And it was natural for me to ask you to participate in that because of the work that you do and the number of leaders that you talk about and the values-based approach that you take. I mean, your show is called Leading with Integrity. And if ever there were a values-based leadership mindset, it's evident in the name of the podcast itself and the folks that listen and give you feedback and those kind of things. It makes sense for me to have asked you, and I've been really grateful for you and all of the folks like you who read it in advance and challenged my thinking and helped me sharpen it and make it the book that it is today, which I hope will be helpful to a lot of other folks. So super grateful.
Well, yeah. I appreciate that, and it's kind of you to say. I feel like you're giving me more credit than I deserve, but thank you. There's a few themes throughout the book that kind of really jumped out at me in particular, and I don't know why. I guess just because they're things that I tend to be quite interested in anyway. So I thought if we go through some of those, and love to hear like your thought process behind them, like your perspective on these issues and what led you to write about them in the way that you did. And they might be a bit too broad, but I'm sure we'll get into the detail as we go. So, sure. I mean, the first really focuses on that communication piece, which makes sense given your background. And I think this is one of the things where I've always found leaders really get themselves twisted up and into trouble very quickly, either because they communicate in an ineffective manner or the wrong time or whatever that issue might be. So from your perspective, I mean, I know we talked about this in our previous episode, but I think it's nice to do it again in the context of your writing now as well. What does really effective communication look like? What are like the key components of that? And what do you think goes wrong most often, and how do we avoid that and be better at it?
Sure. I think that part of the challenge is we've been communicating for our whole lives. And so we think we've mastered communication by the time we've graduated from college, if that's the direction we've gone, or they're finished our apprenticeship or whatever it is that we've gone out, we've launched out into the world. And because we've communicated for our whole lives, we've figured out how to get what we want or what we need. And so we think we've mastered it. And that's, as I talk about in other cases in the book, it's a false mastery. And so what we realize is that all of the things that we need to get done depend on some kind of a connection with another person. And if they depend on connection with that other person, then we have to be able to interact with that person in a productive way. And the degree to which we are more productive or less productive drives the end result that we get. So I use this example. I give a talk on how to be heard, which is kind of intentionally the opposite of the hearing and listening framework, because people want to be heard. They say, I want to be heard. You're not hearing me. You're not listening to me, whatever. If we're not being heard, if people are not listening to what we're saying, we can't accomplish the goal that we're there for. And people call engineering or veterinary science or pharmaceuticals or whatever it is, they call that a hard skill. And then they call communications soft skills. And I use this illustration in the talk where I show a picture of a Porsche 918. And I asked, does anybody want to go for a ride with me? And, people who are car people will know that's a pretty high end, fun, kind of almost a little bit dangerous car to drive. And then the next slide after they say, yeah, that would be fun, I take the wheels off of it in the picture. And I ask, how would we do that without the soft stuff? The truth is that there is no hard and soft. They're all skills. And the skills of being able to communicate well with people are what make all of the other things go. And so where is the big challenge with that? The big challenge is that I say something and I know what it meant, but the person that's on the other side of that communication doesn't have that meaning. And the only way we find out whether we have the shared understanding is that they send us a message back and we evaluate whether or not what they took from it is what we intended for them to take from it. But many leaders, particularly ones that get some degree of fame or recognition or whatever, they end up doing this sort of one-way communication where it's transmitted out there and it lands however it lands, and they're moving on because they knew what they meant and they expected everybody else to get it the same way. And the truth is they didn't. That's why we always hear people saying, I don't want to say things 7, 8, 9 times. Like, well, maybe you wouldn't have to say it 7, 8, or 9 times if you establish shared understanding. And the communications framework is how we do that.
Yeah, those people who say, like, I hate repeating myself. I understand, it's annoying.
Sure.
But is there not like a self-reflection piece needed there to like, why are you having to repeat yourself? It's always thrown out as like it's someone else's fault. They've not understood me. That's not on me, sort of thing, which has always sort of puzzled me for exactly the reason you've just explained, because you're the one transmitting in that scenario. So surely like the onus is on you to ensure clarity and understanding at the other side of that conversation.
That's the secret of the communication model right there. So spoiler alert, I'm spoiling my own book, right? But the secret to the communication model and the power of it is that the sender is always responsible for any breakdown in the message. They're not responsible for interference that happens. If you're talking to somebody, we were just at the racetrack on Saturday and we were talking to a guy, and all of a sudden these cars go rumbling by at 160 miles an hour on the racetrack, and he had to stop what he was saying because the interference, like, he's not responsible for that interference, but he is responsible for saying, I'm going to stop and I'm going to start again when the interference is passed, because he knows that we're not going to hear him mechanically, and if we can't hear him mechanically, we can't do the cognitive work of actually listening. And so he's responsible for making sure that the message that he sent out actually came back to him. And that's what the good communicators do. They take responsibility. It's not about finding fault. It's about taking responsibility so that we can move forward together.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I was reading the book and as we're talking now, like the big example that always flashes in my mind, like with the neon lights around it, is email. Right? How many misunderstandings, miscommunications, interferences, like misreading of tone and intent, all of these things have happened by badly worded emails or rushed emails, or even ones that are just like, you've put loads and loads and loads of thought into it, but you've overcomplicated it. And so the other person hasn't got a hope of knowing what you really mean. So, yeah, I think email is like, I don't want to say the source of all evil in the world, but like, it's got a lot to answer for. Let's say that. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's some really cool techniques that you can use with that if you, again, it's a journey toward mastery. And I don't think any of us ever get there. But it's one of those things where when you start to invest in things, you start to realize there's more to know and there's more to try and there's more techniques. Like one of the things that I found happening was I would need 3 or 4 things, and I would send an email with those 3 or 4 things in them because it was the right thing to do for any number of different reasons. But I would get an email back with one thing. Man, I asked you for 3 things and I need all 3 of them. I don't want to send you 3 separate emails. Why would you're going to hate me for filling up your inbox with 3 different emails. Sometimes that's the right move. And I adapted to that by saying, hey, I'm going to give you a bulleted list in the opening of my email. And I'm going to say, this email I need 3 things from you. And the bulleted list is each of the 3 things in a very short, succinct statement. And then I sign off, see below, whatever. Thanks, Dave. And then there's a section, a bolded heading. Here's the context you need for why I'm asking the question. Here's what I need from you. And then I go, and there's 3 of those bolded sections. My response rate for that, of getting answers to all 3 things, is through the roof. Because people are able to put hooks to, like, I'm setting their expectation, I'm giving them the context, and they know exactly what I need to do. And if I get a note back and it only has 2 of the 3, or one of them's kind of fuzzy, I can go back and say, hey, this is missing. I don't have to restate the case. It's already there, right? And they just scroll back. Oh, I missed that. Sorry, and the response rate goes through the roof and we get stuff done faster.
Yeah. Now, I don't want to offer another spoiler for the book, but one of the phrases that's in there that appeals to me, particularly on this subject, is the story you tell about every word having to earn its place, which feels really relevant right now for what we're talking about. You've given one really practical and useful example there already, but so for like, I don't like saying the words average leader, because that could be taken in either meaning, couldn't it? But the sort of person in an office, their day to day, what kind of tips or advice could you offer them to help them be better at this and to take more responsibility for their communications?
Well, I think it's worth taking just a second to talk about the high level structure of the book, because it makes a difference here.
Yeah, definitely.
The first section of the book, it's a relatively short section. It's probably maybe a quarter of the book. It's called the framework. And the idea behind that is, as a leader, there is a posture and a set of behaviors that we need to exemplify in order for everything else to work. And so the everything else is part 2, and it's what I call the practice. And so what I'm attempting to do in the subsequent chapters in the second part is to demonstrate that, as a curiously humble leader, committed to listening well and then taking action based on what we've heard, and doing that with wisdom, meaning the timely application of knowledge. When we talk about every word needing to earn its place on the page, it starts with this attitude of, I'm not here to tell you everything that's great about me. I'm here to help facilitate getting from point A to point B as a group. And sometimes that's the leader with the title, and oftentimes it's the leader without the title. Not all leaders wear titles. And so when we talk about every word earning its place on the page, that came from a story that I tell in the book about working with somebody else and having a conflict, not a major issue, but just he saw it one way and I saw it another way, and I had this sort of idea, like, I'm the guy, right? I'm the words guy. I got a degree in words. Like, you need to defer to me. And when you look back at the posture, the question is, what can I learn from someone else? And that caused me to stop and reflect and say, okay, how does every word earn its place? And in that chapter, I start asking these other kinds of questions, like, what is the right set of words and how do I discover them? And everybody knows the story that's widely and incorrectly attributed to Mark Twain as, I would have written a shorter letter if I had had more time. And it's actually not from Mark Twain. It's from somebody in the 1600s who's fairly famous, and I'm not going to say who it is so that people could go find that in the book. But it's from the 1600s, and it's from a work that was published on the art of speaking well. And it's this idea of, how do I find what's right, not what's perfect, but how do I get to the soul of the idea that I'm trying to communicate? And there are in the book, I offer 4 steps for how you can derive that is basically giving context, then helping people kind of walk through why it matters to them. And I think that's the secret is we're never going to have enough time to get it perfect. And perfect, as we were talking about before we hit record, perfect is an asymptote. It's a diminishing space between two values that will never ever close. And so if we focus on perfect, we're focusing on the wrong measure. What we're trying to do is incrementally improve so that we have more clear communication in service to the goal we're trying to solve together.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And you've hit on another of the themes from the book that I really love, like the words you've chosen for it as well, leadership posture. I don't think I've heard it described that way before, but it makes so much sense to me. And you think back to like in your own career and you look at it through that lens, you know, okay, well, yeah, my posture wasn't especially helpful in that situation. I probably shouldn't have done that or said that or actually thought that. And once you understand that sort of way of looking at it, I think it's really powerful. And so, I mean, can you expand a bit more on the concept and how you arrived at it as well? Because I know there's some great stories behind it because they're in the book.
Yeah. A lot of times we think about leadership as a position. And that's what we're trained to think about. Like, hey, you want to go through your career and you want to progress, you got to get a title and then you got to get a bigger title and you got to get another. And that gives rise to the myth that leadership is about the title or that it's about the positional authority that we have and those kind of things. And it's really not. And that's kind of what I noticed is people are chasing titles, people are chasing power, and that's a great thing. I mean, if in some cases it can be a great thing, but it's not necessarily leadership. Leadership is about how we go together from point A to point B, however long that journey is, however difficult it is or easy, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's about how do we go from here to there. And I thought about it and I asked the question, what's different between the people that I have worked with that have been leaders that I love, that people follow, and what's different between them and the ones that are worried about people whispering about them behind closed doors. And what's different about that is the attitude that they bring to the thing. It's not their technical qualifications. It's not who they know or how long they've been there. It's not any of those myths that we commonly believe are the path to leadership. It's the fact that they show up asking questions and helping people solve problems, helping people uncover problems. And that noticing in the contrast between the leaders that were worried about people whispering about them behind closed doors and the leaders who didn't care about that kind of thing was glaringly obvious to me as I look back on it, that these were people who said, how can I help? And that is not a skill. That's an attitude. It's a mindset. It's a posture.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the whispering about you thing, it's a tough one, that, isn't it? Because I think for a lot of people, it's not a primal fear, is it? But it brings back bad memories from like school or childhood or things like that. You know, that whole aspect of it. And I can see that being really triggering for a lot of people. But also, you're right. Like the best leaders I've ever worked with are the ones who, like, they never even thought about that. And if they did, they wouldn't care.
Yeah.
Because that wasn't like their focus of what they were doing or why they were there. It was exactly what, as you said, it was, how can I help? Like that was their starting mindset. And I think that's pretty rare, actually. At least it has been in my career.
Yeah, I'll tell you a story that's not in the book that's kind of instructive of that, and it just came to mind as we were talking about this. There was a time when I was working a little earlier in my career, and we were in this all hands meeting, And our new general manager was up on stage talking about everything and how great it was. This is in the era of outsourcing, and we're gonna work with these overseas folks, and they're gonna do all this great stuff. And isn't it amazing? And all of us are just sitting there asking, what is going on? And so afterward, I was standing there with a couple of my colleagues, and I had my back to the stage, and I was talking to them about why it wasn't going to work and what I was concerned about. We're just kind of sounding out, kind of processing through everything. And all of a sudden, the guys behind me, or the guys on the other side of me, are like, their faces just got pale and their countenance dropped. And I looked at him and I said, he's standing right behind me, isn't he? And they're like, yeah. So I turned around and I said hello to him, and he said, so you think it's not going to work, huh? And I said, I'm not saying it isn't going to work. I'm saying that there's some things that are kind of confusing about what you think is going to happen. And I'm not sure if you talked to any of the folks on the ground about it. And he looked at me and he said, hey, come by my office tomorrow at 11:30. Let's go to lunch. I want to hear from you what you see that I didn't see. And what a moment, right? Like, I had the opportunity to just clam up and say, I didn't say anything, right? So, but it's not about me in that moment. It's about his posture saying, what is it that I'm missing? And you seem like a person who's passionate enough that you're willing to tell me what's missing. And that led to a series of different things that ended up in me getting a leadership role in a group that, I wasn't trying to get, and they all voted me to be the leader of the group, and ended up getting an award for my leadership in that group. But that only happened because that guy said, what am I missing? And was willing to say, hey, look, I'll even take you to lunch. And he made it safe for me to say what we noticed on the ground, and we made a demonstrable difference in the business. There could have been more that they could have done, but they did what they could, and then we all moved on. So I believe firmly that the posture makes all the difference in the world.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I thought that story was going to take a very different turn for a minute then. I thought it was like a see me after class sort of moment. But,
yeah, well, that if he hadn't said, hey, come by and we'll go to lunch, then I would have been a little bit more concerned.
Yeah, that could have been a bit tense, couldn't it? Yeah.
But even then, he had the situational awareness to say, like, I'm going to say this thing. And I don't know if he thought about it or not. I haven't talked to him in decades, but I don't know if he had the situational awareness to know that if he said, come by my office, it was going to be one of those really scary things. And so he intentionally said, let's go to lunch, to kind of take the temperature down. But that's the other thing, is as a leader, you got to be mindful of the context that you set and that's communication, right? His frame of reference his intention was, I want to learn more. But if he had just said, come by my office, I would have taken it directly to where you did, which is, getting called to the principal's office. And that's never been a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know about never. Very, very rarely. Yeah.
For me, it was never.
Oh, well, okay. Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. It makes me think about like these frameworks of communication as well, which particularly from a leadership perspective. So I think something else we sort of share is we both, at various points in our lives and careers, spend quite a lot of time with veterans and people who've served. And so one of the things I picked up early in my career was this framework for briefing, effectively. Triggered a memory in me as you were talking through earlier about like the way you talk about context and then what we need to do next, how we're going to do it, all of that sort of thing. And that framework we were taught was situation, mission, execution. And there are a few other bits that we'll skip over for now, like check understanding, all that sort of stuff. But it is that situation is the context, isn't it? What is the situation? Why are we here? Like, what are the overall goals? Why do we need to do these things? Mission is like, what's the task in front of us right now? And execution is, how are we going to do it? Now, in the way I was taught it, that's quite maybe not a great example in our context now, because it was very much a transmit and then check that understanding afterwards. But I think you can still apply it, and it probably fits we're talking about similar things, aren't we? Because you can apply that in a business or a more collaborative setting just as easily, because instead of a briefing, it just becomes a conversation with those headings, those kind of key aspects that you need to hit. And I don't really use it anymore. I just, random memory just popped into my mind.
It's integrated into the gray matter. It's
clearly,
in your brain, and once it's in your brain, that's the beauty of the frame of reference that I talk about in that perception is reality chapter. The frame of reference is active all the time. It's the sum total of all the experiences that you've had. So even though you say, hey, I'm not actually using it, it's in there, and it does influence the way you do what you do, whether it's consciously or subconsciously. And you can pull it forward if you need to, as you just did. And that's the beauty and the power of the framework. That the trouble with the frame of reference is that it also works in the negative way. And we've got to be mindful of where that negative situation like this that I saw in the past, this isn't that situation. In fact, it may be me imposing that previous value equation on top of the current one that isn't actually there, and then everything kind of goes sideways. But what you said there is a briefing context. What's cool about that framework that you mentioned is that it anchors everything in context, in the why, if you will. And so there are cases in which an executive or a leader needs to do sort of the broadcast, the unidirectional messaging. They're probably more rare than not, but there are cases in which that needs to happen. And so part of what we're trying to do is find the balance of each of those elements so that people, when they're executing, they know how to make decisions instead of just like, well, it doesn't match this condition, so now I got to go back to the leader and ask, what do I do? What we really want is people to understand what we're trying to accomplish, so that when they run into the scenario that none of us could have anticipated, they can make a good, solid decision that gets us towards the goal. And they may make a mistake, but at least they made that mistake by making the best choice that they could in the context of what we were asking them to accomplish. So that framework that you described actually is super applicable all the time, because we have to let people understand why, what, how, when, all those kinds of things, so that they can make the best decisions they can on the ground. And then when we do that checking phase, we're actually going to get a much better result.
Yeah. I mean, that's usually been my experience when I've either used it or seen it used. I don't know. I sort of see, so the context thing I've always seen is really important in any kind of application of leadership. And I think it speaks, it's one of the big differences between management and leadership in my view anyway, is adding that contextual piece. Because the manager will be about like the process, the what and the when. Whereas the leader adds no, actually, we also need context, because if people don't understand why they're doing it, they're probably, they might take a wrong turn, or they might not work as hard, they might not be as invested in it, because it's just, it's just a job, and why should I care about it? And it ties it into that vision. And then also like the collaborative conversation around the how, I think, the great managers will do that as well, but I'm not sure they have to unless they're actually leaders, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of nuance between those two terms, and there's a high degree of overlap. I think you can be a manager or you can be a leader who also manages, and the question is, what is the goal that you're trying to accomplish? And that's what really separates the two. Like if you're just get everything in the boxes it's supposed to be in, it's going to be potentially a more brute force kind of behavior. And if you're leading as a manager, you're probably going to outperform your peers and do other things that other managers aren't going to be able to do. And that's sort of the leadership layer. It's like, hey, along the way of doing this, we also discovered that. And so we either did those things or we rolled them up to say, hey, do you want us to do these things? Here's how we think they could benefit. Yeah, now's the right time. Let's go ahead and do that. Or no, now is not the right time, but now we're going to materially change what comes next because of what you learned. And I feel like that's a difference between a leader and a manager. That's one of the key differences.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's stick versus carrot as well, isn't it? Not to oversimplify. But I think, as you say, like the managers who really overperform are the ones who are leading because they're using the carrot or the stick. Whereas the ones who aren't really leading, it's more like, well, I'm the manager and I said you've got to do it, so you do it, or I don't know, I won't pay you, or I'll sack you, or whatever, And it's, I mean, on the face of it, that's very clearly one of those is going to work a lot better than the other. And yet when you're in the moment, again, it's back to posture, isn't it? You're not thinking of it in that way.
And there are clearly times where you have to manage. You're like, look, you and I've talked about the value and risk of performance improvement plans, right? When they're restorative and they're intentional, they're a fantastic tool, but that is a management tool, right? Like, we are going to manage your performance either into the place it needs to be, or we're going to manage you out of the business. And that's totally legit. We're not talking about the weaponized version of PIPs. That's a topic for a different discussion. And you and I talked about that a little bit at length on the last call, but that's a key difference. There are things that we have to do as managers that are managing things, and they got to be done a particular way. There's not a lot of latitude, but yeah, definitely we want to be mindful of our posture that leads us towards the leadership work and less toward the managing.
Yeah, I agree. I guess where I come from on it is that, yes, of course, there's always going to be some management things that you have to do, but it shouldn't be the default setting. It shouldn't even be like the first resort, if you like. Maybe the last. It depends on the context, doesn't it? Lovely. Well, keeping an eye on the time. Don't want to steal too much from you today.
We should do the acquired style episodes where we go for 4 or 5 hours. I'm kidding.
Yeah, I'd need more warning if we're going to do that. I mean, I'm not saying no, but
it'd be fun to try sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. So the final thing from the book that I'd love to touch on is it's kind of two aspects of it really towards the end of the book. But there's one word in particular which I think we probably talked about before. Again, like I think we're aligned in our view on this in the context of leadership. That word is empathy. And it's becoming a buzzword, isn't it, in leadership and elsewhere of late. But I don't think that should be allowed to detract from how important it is for a modern leader in a modern workplace. And then the other aspect of it, which is sort of, I don't know, I kind of think it's maybe like the other side of the same coin, is this idea of taking care of yourself as the leader. And again, this is a question that's come up quite a lot on the podcast over the years. And it's something where I sort of flip back and forth to different sides of the fence about should a leader put their people first or look after themselves first before they can look after anyone else. And I've always traditionally been like the former, like, put your people first. That's your job as a leader. But I'm coming around to the other perspective. Like, other people have argued very successfully, not argued, but persuaded me that actually, no, you're right. Like if everything in your life is burning down around you and you're falling apart at the seams, you're in no position to look after anyone, are you? So I've kind of already answered my own question, but why do these concepts matter from your perspective? And what do some of the daily practices look like for people who feel like they want to work on these things?
I think it's a good question to wrestle with, but I think it's also a false choice. It's an either or that we set up of like, either I take care of the people or I take care of myself. And that's not the choice. The question is, how do I best lead? And so I hold that leadership is not about motivating people. It drives me bonkers when people say, your job is to motivate. The job of the CEO is to motivate. It's not the job of the CEO to motivate. You can't motivate anybody. What you do have control of is creating the conditions for their motivation to thrive or to wither. And those are intentional choices that we make every single day. And so if if our job as leaders is to create the conditions in which someone else's motivation can thrive, then is their motivation going to thrive if I'm grumpy, if I'm unable to make space for them, if I'm so busy that they can't come to me and say, I need some help, or what do you think? If I'm so busy but I make that space, but they're rushed, or I'm not present, or any of those things, then I haven't fulfilled my fundamental duty to them as a leader. And so I talk in the book about some visual examples of how you can lock that in, and I won't spoil them here, but the false choice that has taken root of I don't take care of myself leads to this very stoic and unhelpful and very damaging thing that leads so many leaders to the edge of burnout. And so we can recklessly over-index on that. We can kind of lean towards narcissism of like, well, I have to take care of myself because I'm the most important. And we need the moderating effect, right? Or the moderating influence of the situational awareness. So I do talk about this all the time is when you're on the airplane, the oxygen mask drops and what do? Like, it's not helpful to put the oxygen mask on other people first, because if you get hypoxic, your brain doesn't work. It literally physiologically doesn't work. And so everybody then ends up in a worse condition. So taking care of yourself is taking care of other people, but moderating that in a way that says, I am carving out some space to take care of myself. For years, I didn't do any professional development. So one of the things I recommend to leaders all the time is, tell me about the last time you spent an hour reading a book to professionally develop. Tell me about a time where you went to the last conference. Oh no, I make sure all my people go to conferences and I don't have any budget to go to conferences. Great. You're laying this foundation in which your leadership is going to crumble. So if you're not investing, like who's your mentor? Who's your coach? Who are you, like, what are you doing to make sure that you are progressing as a leader in the same way that your people are progressing? So make sure there's some budget for you. Doesn't have to be a lot, but some budget. Make sure there's time allocated for you. Doesn't have to be a lot, but it needs to be some, and it needs to be regular. And make sure that you're in relationships that are outside your normal sphere, so that you're learning from other people and you're being challenged by other people. So those are just some of the things that I oftentimes will recommend, not so much as a coach. I mean, I will sometimes make those recommendations as a coach to consider those things. I generally try not to be prescriptive about what people should do, but they're things that I see successful leaders doing. And then stop seeing your people as a distraction from the work you need to do. Player coaches or player managers are a big thing in the last 15 or 20 years. The pure play manager is not as much a thing anymore. So I have all my stuff to build. I just had a post on LinkedIn where somebody said, I'm trying a new thing. I'm the CEO of this company and he's a great guy. This is not to demean him in any way, but I've decided that I'm not doing any calls or any messages. I'm not even going to have my cell phone until noon. And my experience as a C-suiter in small to medium businesses under $10 million is my team's usually jammed up in the morning because of something happened at the end of the day yesterday and they need help. But if I'm going to be like, hey, I'm busy doing the important work, they're stuck until noon when I come out of the cave. So I have found that understanding the cadence of my team and being able to be a roadblock remover for them if they need it, be a sounding board for them if they need it, there's a cadence for doing that. And we can get off into a tangent about makers and managers, and I hate that. It's not productive because we're all makers at some level. My point is, we've got to figure out what the right cadence is for our team.
Yeah, I mean, not to pat myself on the back, but I feel like this is why I end up on the fence quite a lot, because you're right, the answer's both, isn't it? And it's like your priority should be looking after your people, absolutely, but you're one of those people. Like, and you're right, it's a false choice.
Yeah. Well, that's the essence of a team, right? That you're on the team. The team is comprised, like you think of a baseball team, right? The team isn't just the people on the field. It's the people in the front office. It's the people in the dugout. That's the team. We fall into this weird dichotomy that the team is the people who are on the field, whatever that figurative field is. But that's not the case. The team is the organization that manifests itself in the game on Friday night or whatever day you're playing the game. But that isn't the team. The whole team has to work well as an organization, as an organism.
Absolutely. And that's why I'm always suspicious and, to be honest, critical of leaders who consciously try to set themselves apart from the team. Now, I mean, there's office and workspace dynamics involved in that, aren't there? I don't want to go off on a rant about open plan offices again, because I've literally just done that this week, but yeah,
we won't go there. Even though we could.
Yeah,
we won't.
Yeah, and then there's like having a physical office when you're the boss and you literally shut your door. But then also, like, why can't everyone have an office? Like, people need quiet space to work sometimes. Anyway, yes, let's not get into that.
You're trying to pull me in, and I'm not going to go.
No,
I want to go,
I'm not,
but I'm not going to go.
The soapbox isn't even in the room. I've left it outside.
That's a topic for a different day. Maybe someday we'll have a conference and we'll have more of a panel opportunity to dig into that kind of.
Yeah, I mean, that would be cool. It's, I am genuinely curious, though, to see where all of that sort of thing goes over the next 5 years, particularly with like remote, hybrid and back to office and all of these kind of quite tense issues at the moment in a lot of places.
All I can do is sigh and say, I'm with you. I want to go there, and I will not. Not today.
Yeah, that's fair. So, I mean, is there anything I've missed about the book? Is there anything else that you'd like to say or talk about, or any other issues or points you want to bring up?
I think one of the reasons that I always like to talk to you is because you're very thorough and you hit on the key points. And so I think the only other thing I would say, the key takeaway is the reason that the book is called Engineering Wisdom is kind of a play on the two. It's not for engineers, although I think I wrote the book because I've worked in highly technical environments, and a lot of engineers think engineering is the solution, the hard stuff, the technical stuff. And we know what engineering is and we know what wisdom is, but we don't necessarily think of them together. Right? Wisdom is something you have, not something you engineer or you get. And so in the intro to the book, I explain why that juxtaposition exists. But I think that what matters is, what do we do going forward? And so the book starts with this idea of, let's reflect on life and what we've learned and where the nuggets of knowledge are, and how do we assemble those raw materials of knowledge in ways that we can actually do something with them. And the book is a journey from, I don't know how to lead, or I've been in leadership and I'm burned out, I'm frustrated, I kind of actually hate it, and that's not why I got into leadership in the first place. And we go through this framework and this practice, not as a prescription, but as a framework for being able to harness the knowledge and turn it into wisdom. And then the last chapter is onward, right? We're in the middle stage of a journey, and we can change the future and how we experience the remainder of that journey. So just because we find ourselves at the beginning or at the middle of it and we're not happy with it, doesn't mean it has to be that way for the rest of the time. And that's the goal. That's why I wrote the book. I wrote the book because I want new leaders who are hungry to understand how to be an effective leader, because they haven't been trained that way. So they get a head start. And for leaders who are in the system or in the process and are frustrated and burning out, to know that it's possible to do something different. And my entire goal with the book is not that you read it, put it on the shelf and say, wow, that was a good book, but that you do something with it. And that to me makes the book worth writing.
And worth reading.
I hope so.
Great point as well at the beginning about it. I like to get at least one cliche into every episode, as you may or may not remember. But when you're talking about engineers always seeing engineering as a solution, it reminded me of a hammer sees every problem as a nail.
Right.
And, and it's the same for leaders. Like, we see the solution to every problem as being people, right? And that's not always the case. Maybe it is. I don't know. I'm biased. But anyway, so I got my cliche in. There we go.
Well, yeah. As long as you get your cliche in. I think the truth is that people are a part of the solution as much as processes are, as much as materials are. We don't want to over-index on anything, and we don't want to under-index on it. And I say this all the time: all things in balance. And sometimes we overweight for a period of time on something, but if we're doing that strategically and we know why we're doing it, that's okay. So yeah, there is a place for engineering and hardcore engineering. And there's also a place for, the people side. And we can learn so much from the people side and apply it to engineering. I always say people problems are way more difficult than engineering problems because they don't reduce to math. So yes, people will always be part of the equation. And if they will, then it's worth figuring out how we strengthen our connection to those people so that we can get better things done.
Absolutely.
Leadership Heroes.
You may remember I have a question that I ask every time. Now, you've already answered it in the past. And I think your leadership hero last time was a former boss, someone you'd worked for.
It was Anne. Yep. I talked about Anne in the book. And I knew you were going to ask me this question. So ask me the question, because I have another answer.
Well, I was going to say, do you want to change your answer or pick a new person? So,
I don't want to change my answer. I want to add to my answer with a different person.
All right. So yeah, go on then. Leadership heroes then. Anyone you can think of, but someone who, for you, would perfectly embody leadership. And then you've got to explain why as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I know that this can be anybody from history known to me or not known to me. And I choose the people that are known to me because I like to celebrate real people doing real work who and the person I will add to the pantheon of leaders that I really respect is this guy named Mike Yamerick. And I haven't talked to Mike in years. We've lost contact, and I've tried to reach out to him a couple of times. So, Mike, if you're listening here, let me know. But there's a lot of talk right now about, leading from the front is bad. And I don't agree with that. I think that's unhealthy talking points. I think it is important to lead from the front. And that doesn't mean we lord it over people. So the reason that I picked Mike here is because Mike is a guy that was all in on cultivating his team and finding the right people and asking, how can I help you be successful? And there's a story where this other guy and I got assigned to a project. It was a dumpster fire of a project. It was behind in accounts receivable. It was behind in percent spent or percent complete, and ahead in percent spent for all the project managers in the world to know what that means. It was 3.5 months from the release date, and only 1/3 of the project had even been contemplated. It was just a real disaster. And Mike said, "Hey, you're in Raleigh, and the project is out in RTP. Could you just roll over there and see what's going on?" We found out how bad it was. He asked me and the other guy to step in. He provided all the support we needed that he could give. Right now, there were constraints that he had to operate within, but there was one point where we were up in Woodbridge, New Jersey, on the client site, and in walked Mike at I don't know, 8:00 at night or something like that. Like, what are you doing here? And he said, I came to see what I could do to help. And, we had been working literally 130 hours a week at that point. It was ridiculous. I had a hotel room for 2 weeks and I spent less than 4 hours in it for the whole 2-week period. The fact that Mike showed up on the front line with us and said, what can I do to help? And didn't tell us, I don't think he just did it. He just got in the car and he drove a couple hours to come up and he stayed there. And that's what we mean when we talk about a posture of leadership. Mike had a title. Mike had a lot of authority. He told people to go someplace and they went place and they came. But he was aware of what was happening and he was willing to be present, and not just to be present to like, I'm going to preside, but I rolled up his sleeves and he said, how can I help? And we told him, we're like, you can do this. And then at some point we ran out of stuff for him to do and we said, go home. There's no reason for you to stay here. And he's like, okay, but if you need anything, you let me know and I'll come back. And that's the kind of leaders that I aspire to be. That's the kind of leader I think we need more of.
I would absolutely agree with that. I know what you mean, this whole leading from the front thing. And I feel it, again, it comes back to what meaning we assign to these phrases, doesn't it? So, like, the traditional sense of it, I guess, is like the leader who says, come on, follow me, and charges off into the distance and never looks back to see if anyone's actually following them.
That's right.
Which is problematic. And I sort of get why people see a problem with that. But to me, it's leading by example. That's what it's really about. Mm. And any leader who's not doing that, I would argue, isn't leading at all. And I think that is such a great story and such a great illustration of the point. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're out of time, sort of. Not that we set a time limit particularly, but yeah. So final thing then, the book. When's it out? Where can we get a copy?
Yeah. So the book will come out officially and be available for purchase on November the 3rd, 2025. And it'll be on Amazon. It'll come out as a paperback and a Kindle, and eventually we'll get to the audio and other things. But for now, I'm just releasing it. So that's where you go to find it on Amazon. In the meantime, if you're super interested, you can go to engineeringwisdombook.com and sign up for the Beyond the Pages update. It's called Beyond the Pages. And if you do that, you'll get the PDF download of the first part, the framework. So you can kind of read ahead while you wait for your book to show up.
Very cool and very exciting as well. Best of luck. Yeah, I'm sure it's going to be a great launch. And yeah, can't wait to see it on the shelves, the digital shelves, I suppose, but still.
Yep. Well, hopefully we'll get through the other side of the process. I'm learning. It's a self-published book, so I'm learning how do you get it out there. And there is a process for getting it on bookstore shelves, but it's not the traditional. You have an agent who gets it out there and does a big splash. So it'd be tough in the near term. You won't find it on the bookstore shelf, but so Amazon is the place. And if you have any trouble with it, people can reach out to me and I'll figure out how to get them a copy.
Lovely. Well, I will put the web address and things in the show notes for everyone to find easily anyway. And
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, that's it. Thanks for being here again. It's always lovely to see you.
Always a great conversation. Thank you for the work that you do. And again, for the folks that listen, that make the show possible. I'm grateful that they hopefully have stuck around to the bitter end.
Well, likewise. Thank you for coming back again, Dave. As always, I loved that conversation. It's always great chatting with you. And I say it every time, but come back anytime. Listeners, viewers, if you would like to learn more about Dave and his work, if you want to get a copy of that book, which I do highly recommend, find the links down in the show notes. As always, if you are new to leadership and you're looking for something beyond those pages of the leadership books, as excellent as they may be, you're looking for people who do get it, who are going through similar struggles as new leaders themselves. That is why I am building Integrity Leaders, the community. It is there for you, for leaders who are new to it, new to the job, new to the practice, who care more about people than power or authority or control, and who want to get more out of their teams without losing their sense of purpose and self. If that sounds like you, if you're looking for support with your leadership, then do come along and join us. You will find again that link down there in the show notes. And as a podcast listener, you can benefit from a 50% off discount code as well. The website is www.leadingwithintegrity.co.uk. And once you get there, hit that big green button to sign up today. Look forward to seeing you there very soon. And all that's left for me to say is thank you so much for being with us today. I hope you'll be back again next week when I'll be talking with corporate spy Jeremy. And until then, stay safe, keep reading, and be a leader, not a boss.